It's Monday, it's 3 o'clock. Welcome to Together Unlocked, brought to you as always by Together 2012. We're led by disabled artists and based in the main coast borough of Newham, creating a Paralympic cultural legacy. But as you'll see in a minute, we are also working around the UK and beyond. I'm Ju Gosling, also known as the artist Ju90. I'm the artistic director, and locked in with me, where she's been for nearly a year now, is our chair, the artist and campaigner Julie Newman. First, we're going to go to the other end of, well, not the other end of the UK, but the other end of our long wheeled virtual sofa outside of London to the West Midlands for some introductions and audio description, and then we'll give you a bit more audio description and tell you what's going on later.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to week 9 or 10, I suppose, of 2021. Hi, I'm Robin Surgener. I am the business director at Together 2012, and we are, as Ju said, up here in the West Midlands at the other end of our long-wheeled sofa. You will have seen a big wide shot of our studio space just then, and we brought it back so we can see the lovely red curtains warming the studio. So what do I look like today? Well, as ever, I have my increasingly long silvery white hair, no rimmed black armed glasses, magnifying my deep blue eyes, obviously. I am shaven-ish. And I am wearing a grey hoodie which says Team GB and then Tokyo below that, and there is some what I assume to be Japanese characters, as in writing. I've got to say, I think that after however many shows we've now done, I've mixed and matched my wardrobe to the nth degree, and you are going to now just see repetitions of outfits.
Hi, I'm Josh Surgener. I'm a PhD student and Together Unlocked host. I have very long blonde hair. I'm not shaven, not at all. And I am wearing a grey, kind of dark grey, long sleeve, quarter zip jacket that says Chicago Bulls. And it has a bull with a red face and white horns.
Yes, I mean, I was thinking about the haircuts, as you know, because I think 3 out of 4 of us haven't had a haircut in 12 months, or at least not one that hasn't been self inflicted. And I was thinking, oh, I can't wait. By the summer, I'm going to have a haircut. And then I thought, yeah, and it's going to look good for exactly 2 weeks. And all of that 2 weeks, I'm going to be worrying just in case my vaccine hasn't been affected. And I'm going to worry if I'm infected. And then I'm going to need another haircut. So I've decided this is the year of the hats. So for as long as eBay works and the sales are on somewhere in the world, I think I will still be mixing and matching the hats. But of course, inevitably, because we've had no social care support for nearly 12 months, I think our clothes, you can just tell whether they've come out of a back shelf or not, by whether or not they've been ironed. So I am wearing a lovely turquoise blue soft woolen sweater with lots and lots of wrinkles, because it's just come straight out of the wash. Do not pass go and get ironed. I'm wearing a grey, what would you call this hat?
Fedora.
No, I don't think it's a fedora.
Okay.
Pork pie.
No, it's not a pork pie.
I've got my tipper on, as we say in East London. So yes, I have a grey hat on. We'll come back to what I think it is when I can remember the word. I've got green eyes behind black plastic glasses, pale olive skin, silver coloured jewellery, and black wrist braces. Behind me is our Together graffiti banner, and if you go to our website www.together2012.org.uk, you will see a number of images of the whole banner, but it's got pictures over it of all of the different arts activities we cover during the year, from street art, carnival art, live art, live music, visual art, craft, photography, filmmaking, and much, much more. Later today, what we're going to be talking about in our regular weekly app date are arts apps, and then we're going to be talking about photography and filmmaking after 3:30, and in particular, having a chat about the Glasgow Film Festival, the Golden Globes, and the situation at the moment for disabled filmmakers and, of course, disabled actors. At the end of the show on a Monday, we relax with Awa, where Ara Jagnay leads us into a sort of a meditation relaxation session because it's Monday, it's lockdown. So we all wish it was Friday, is the honest truth. Julie, you've been very, very patient. Who are you? What do you look like?
Well, my name's Julie Newman. I'm the chair of Together. I have gold and silver lengthening hair. I have dark rimmed glasses. I have a black and white checked shirt on with a t-shirt underneath it, which is sort of grey speckled. And I'd say Boredar.
Thank you. Thank you. We were hoping for some Welsh. So happy St. David's Day. It's the 1st of March. It's St. David's Day. It's been a lovely sunny day in London just to welcome those daffodils, although they've yet to pop out. How is it for the weather with you?
Cold and foggy, actually.
Oh my goodness.
I was going to go grey and gross. So
Well, let's hope you're having a bit of sunshine in Wales. Do you want to tell us what Boredar means, Julie?
Good day or good morning.
Any more tips from us as somebody who used to live in Wales?
What about speaking Welsh? Well, there's lots of YouTube learn how to speak Welsh lessons available. So anybody who's really interested in learning how to speak Welsh, I would really recommend that. I think it's worth considering several things. One is that they've got a different alphabet. Welsh has got a different alphabet to English. So there's a little bit of learning there before you even start in terms of pronunciation. And the other is that once you get into it, and I think these YouTube videos are really helpful, then it's an interesting language because I find it has roots in Latin. If you listen to it, if you listen to the sounds without looking at how they're written, there are sounds that sound like Latin to me.
So St. David, of course, is the patron saint of Wales, and today is St. David's Day. I looked up a very interesting BBC website which said 5 facts about St. David. He was born in a storm in the year 500, and according to legend, his mother gave birth to him on a Pembrokeshire cliff top. Pembrokeshire is somewhere we used to visit a great deal, isn't it? And I've done lots and lots of work in Pembrokeshire, so I might talk about that a bit later. He became a renowned preacher and possibly founded the Abbey at Glastonbury, but nobody's very sure. He was a teetotal vegetarian, although I think that's putting a sort of modern slant on a sort of monk's life, because in fact it was very much about kind of living pure lives and lives where you weren't overstimulated by meat. And he performed miracles, and his biggest miracle was when people at the back complained they couldn't hear him. The ground on which he stood rose up to form a hill, and a white dove sent by God settled on his shoulder. Now, as a wheelchair user who's been stuck at the back of umpteen gigs, I just think, what about a modern miracle where the viewing platform rises from the back and everybody gets an opportunity to see, without even people rushing to the front of the viewing platform who are ambulant and blocking our views again? So yes, that's not very respectful, but I'm afraid as soon as I heard about the sort of the audience being lifted up, I just thought, if only. And people have been keeping St. David's Day for hundreds and hundreds of years. He was buried in what's now known as the city of St. David's. And is it the smallest city in the UK or the smallest city in the world? I can't quite remember.
Definitely in the UK for sure. It is very small, but it's got a cathedral, which is what makes it a city.
And his body is buried in the cathedral. And yeah, you were remembering there's a tourist trail as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there's in Pembrokeshire. Pembrokeshire's got a very, very active tourist board. And they've set up a St. David's Trail to be able to, sort of like for tourists, inviting them to go to the different places that St. David was associated with.
Yes, so I mean, St David's is a lovely place to go, although of course none of us supposed to recommend anywhere to go on holiday at the moment. But it's also got a fantastic surf beach called White Sands, one of my favourite kind of little popular beaches. And yeah, it's just a lovely place to visit, isn't it? The cathedral is actually surrounded, like so many of these places are, by very high grass, because of course that was what happened to all the burials in the Middle Ages, wasn't it? So it's still marked by plague, which I think again makes it a little bit more relevant for COVID-19 and 2021. But we've got ahead of ourselves a little bit, Julie Borrada, and we were going to go back and just ask, because we've not seen the others since Friday. We always recommend something for the weekend to do on a Friday. And did you do any of it? What did you do at the weekend?
Well, I worked a lot with lots of swimming stuff, and then Patton and I. So to clear up the weather situation, we actually had an absolutely beautiful weekend. And we went out to a place called Kingsbury Water Park, which is, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles from where we live. And then it's I don't know if it used to be like I think it's an old gravel pit complex that's been turned into there's water skiing, sailing, scuba diving, open water swimming, normally anyway. But it's it's really really lovely space. And Emily and I took our chairs with we've got these off-road front wheels, which lift the casters off the floor, which make it much much easier to go on anything other than tarmac.
A smooth marble.
Yeah. And we went on I did it on Strava, which is an app. Sorry, I could have talked about that, couldn't I? But anyway, an app on the phone which follows where you've been and kind of tells you your distance. And we did 2.5 miles around about 4 lakes, which isn't necessarily very far, but when it is kind of off road, and you kind of roots and loose stones, but then you get to the bit where the one point where there's an incline is always when it's slippery and wet, and then but it was fun. I mean, it was really really lovely. So we did that.
Yeah, you
And
always lose grip on the hill.
Yeah, I mean, I can't push myself from one end of a shop to the other if it's got carpet. So 2.5 miles, please. Most of us sitting there go, what?
Yeah, but it is something we do. I mean, and we are fortunate to be quite fit sports people. Impairment aside, it's just an inconvenience sometimes. And so but I was saying is that it was the point was it was lovely. And actually, once we got past, sort of lots of people walk out the first 300 yards. At which point there was almost, you're kind of thinking, crikey, and me and Emily are trying to get in the bush so we keeping enough distance from everybody else. But then once you got out there, it was just lovely. I mean, it was so calm that every mirror was like every lake was like
every mirror was like a lake.
Yeah, every lake was like a mirror. Just it was beautiful, incredible reflections. And
I had a far less adventurous weekend. I was still busy with work. We watched some TV that was far too sad, and then watched the England-Wales match, which was also really sad. So,
from an English perspective,
from an English point of view, it was quite sad. Yeah. Wales are on for the jammiest of Grand Slams, but there we go.
What was the final score? Something like 40?
The final score was not representative of the match because Wales had 14 points that should not have been awarded because the referee made some mistakes that even the Welsh said they shouldn't have got the tries for. And if a Welsh person says Wales shouldn't have been awarded a try, you know that they shouldn't have been awarded a try.
Well, that one individual aside, I think it's probably time to move on again. I mean, I'd worked through the last weekend. This is obviously turning into some kind of competition. So I very sensibly decided to do as little as possible apart from necessary chores, which always seem to take up quite a long time, don't they? I mean, Julie and I made a great sacrifice, and financially and time-wise, and watched Sia's film Music on Saturday, partly because it was up for the Golden Globes last night, and partly because I'm chairing a session at Glasgow Film Festival tomorrow and wanted to talk about it. But I'll come back to that after 3:30, when traditionally on a Monday we talk photography and film. And didn't do much else. Did you do anything that wasn't watching films, Julie? Did you do any painting?
I did a little bit of painting, but I really enjoyed a film with Helen Mirren in it.
Oh, we'll talk about that later
yeah,
as
I
well.
really
then.
enjoyed that. So
I think
But you are
yeah.
doing some painting with tea bags, aren't you?
yeah, well, I've done my teabagish bits and got a bit distressed about how limited they were in terms of the color, etc. So I've just decided to do a little bit of watercolor to outline the detail, and maybe a little bit of I don't know, some pastels or something, just to darken it a little bit.
And that's following up from another thing we talk about on Friday is our arts club. So we have a clubs program, and that's aimed at any disabled person and anybody they want to bring with them. In more usual times, we would meet in a physical venue, and then it would be anybody who could get to us. At the moment, we're meeting by Zoom and on the phone, so it's anybody who's got internet access. Our poetry club on a Wednesday is a phone-based club where we phone you and we pay all the costs, and we can phone a landline or a mobile. So you really only need internet access for art club, which is Tuesdays and Fridays. And then on the second Monday, we have a photography and filmmaking club. So that's coming up in a week's time. And on the fourth Monday, we have a dance on screen club. You can find out all about our club's program under the 2021 program, which is on our website, www.together2012.org.uk. But now it's time for our regular weekly update. Robin, I know you had one for us officially, but tell us a little bit as well about the one you just mentioned.
Oh, Strava. It's something. It's an app, and it's not a new app at all. It's a essentially it's a free app. I do think that you can, like most of these things, buy deeper into it. But it's a map that uses satellite navigation, I guess, to in your whatever your phone or your watch, whatever it is that you happen lucky enough to have. Um, and you go say you open it and it tells you where you are and you press go, and then it literally it records where you move. So literally you could, I mean, it's that accurate that actually you can use it in the house. If you wanted to record how far you walked up and down your house or what rolled up and down your house, it would do that. But what's quite nice is, so like with Saturday, um, it's mapped the route that we and recorded the route that we took. Then you can choose to save it. So if you've done a walk that you like, you go, okay, cool. It tells you how far you went, how long it took, what your average speed was, how many calories you probably burnt. Um, I think actually it has a setting in there for wheelchair users, but specifically, but because I'm lucky enough to have that on my watch, I use that for the actual energy use.
Yeah, I think not necessarily in the functionality of the app, but I think because it does kind of track, it paints a kind of ready orange line of your route. There's a whole kind of section of Strava art, which is people drawing pictures with their running route or cycling route. So that when you kind of look at it on that top-down satellite view, it creates a picture on the street,
Yeah.
which is quite cool. And there's kind of ways that you can go and find you can kind of go to what city you live in and see what pictures you can draw and stuff like that, which is quite
That
funny.
sounds fabulous. I've never heard anything about these things. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not somebody who is interested in how far I've gone or how many calories I've used, but I love the idea of the art. So we have a highlights and links page on our website. You can find it. It's the first item underneath Together Unlocked TV, and it's also linked from that page. And the Together Unlocked TV page has recordings of all of the shows that we've done. But the highlights and links page has links to everything we've talked about and any videos and things we've shown. So we'll get a separate link into the artwork.
Can I just sorry, just to add on to it, the other nice thing about Strava is it kind of mirrors a lot of what we think about, in the sense of it's a very community orientated app. So you're on it individually, but then it links, like a lot of phones will link up. And if I go on a walk, I'll get a message from someone I haven't seen for 6 months going, "Oh, cool walk, Rob." Or I get messages, "Oh, so and so did this today," and you kind of go, "Oh, nice." And it's just a really nice kind of you know, way of keeping in touch with people, that's kind of not having to think about what to say, but just give them a big thumbs up.
And presumably, if you're exploring somewhere you don't know, you've got that kind of whole thing. Well, this is the way I went. I can check it back on Google Maps and Street View and so on. So the other one you've got is Controlly that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about this one, or?
Yeah, it's an app that we kind of stumbled across, really looking at something on the App Store, and it kind of popped up as a, they have their kind of like apps we recommend or new apps we think are cool, or whatever. Um, and it was in one of those kind of front page lists. And it is, you have a wireless games controller, and you can then use that and kind of map all of the different buttons on that to specific functions of your computer. So, for example, if you struggle to use a mouse, you could set the analog stick to be your mouse cursor, so you can do that and control it that way rather than having to move a mouse around a desk. But then obviously it has lots and lots. There's lots of buttons on a games controller. You can then select each one of those buttons and give that a specific function. So something like volume up, volume down, or it can be things like undo, redo, select. Those sorts of things that are normally kind of multiple button presses.
Could we go back to the beginning for a minute? And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that I'm not the only one who's lost here, but I appreciate that I might be. I've sort of lost track again. So the app's called Controlly and it runs on.
Well, we saw it for Macs.
I think it goes across platforms from what I
So
saw.
I don't understand. So where does the games controller come in?
Okay, so the idea is, it's someone has gone. There are people who have dexterity issues, who find using individual mouses and trackpads difficult. And again, sometimes when you've got to press control and shift and something else, you've only got one hand, for example, it becomes almost impossible. So someone has gone, well, okay, could we link a game's wireless controller and use that controller to control your PC or your Mac? So it's got the link between it being a games controller and gaming doesn't exist. It's not about gaming. It's
no, it was just so. But would you need a gaming system, or can you buy the games controllers separately?
No, you need the controller, but you don't need the Xbox to go with it.
Yeah,
you just need the controller.
Yeah, you can go to the shop and buy a wireless controller. You don't have to have an Xbox
So it's an Xbox specific controller.
No,
or any wireless games controller, PlayStation, Xbox, third party PlayStation or Xbox. It's just a controller. It's got nothing to do with the gaming system. It's just it needs the controller.
Yeah, it's using its connectivity and the amount of things that actual switches that a controller has, and then you can map it pretty much any way that you want. At least from what I've seen,
No, it sounds very interesting. Funnily enough, I was thinking about what they call macros last week, where you can literally say, sorry, Josh, I'm finding you looking down really distracting.
I was just looking to see if it said any specifics about which controller it needs, but it doesn't seem to.
Yeah, so let's just leave that for now. But with a macro, for example, you might very often launch your mail program, open a new email, and send it, I don't know, to report into your boss for the day. And you can record all of that as a macro, assign it to button number 1, and just press button number 1. You know, you can go, oh, well, I always save my folders, my files, and I put them into such and such a folder. And all of those tasks you can automate. So it's worth bearing that in mind as well. You know, it can be quite straightforward to do what they call assigning macros. So anything you do on a regular basis, you can also record on your keyboard and bring it down to just one thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's more so for someone like Mum, for example, that's got both limited kind of dexterity but movement. Some of the functionality within her computer, kind of multitasking and swiping with multiple fingers in different directions and things like that, or things like pressing things like undo, that's multiple keys that have to be pressed at the same time. She really struggles to do that. She's only got one arm and not great finger movement. So I think the idea of this is that rather than having to do that or have to press a key on the keyboard, you can literally you can map. You go on, there's a drop down menu that's Command Shift whatever, and then assign that to the X button. So you then literally you just go to your controller and press X.
You want a whole bunch of macros because there's still a limit in what you can get onto a controller. I mean, yeah, I've never understood how people are supposed to use swipes, but it's not something, you know, oh, you can do this with your fingers and you can do that with your fingers. And the answer is you get your 3 fingers and you do such and such. And I'm thinking, no, my fingers are not going to do that. Let me just find a different way of doing it. So yeah, that sounds great. So Julie, tell us, I'm just going to pop this app up on the screen for a minute.
Yes, I came across the Adobe Lightroom as an app which was recommended to use with iPhones and iPads. So I thought, well, I'll have a play with it and see just how good it is. So I installed it, and then I've got a couple of photographs following.
So this is Google Play, this one, but they do it for the Mac as well, presumably.
Yeah, I mean that was just where the recommendation came up, but I got it. I downloaded it from the App Store. It's free. It's completely free. Although I'm sure if you want to add, whistles and bells, you can add your whistles and bells.
Yes, it had some in-app purchases. So tell us what it does, and then I'll put the before and after pictures up.
Well, basically, what it does is it gives you it extends your screen inside the right-hand side of your screen. You've got a list of editing tools, and literally you just tap onto them, or you use your Control E, and then you can adjust. But the adjustment is actually quite fine-tuned. I thought it was interesting because although there's all sorts of editing suites around, and I do have quite a few available that I've downloaded from the App Store, I thought I'd try this one just to see, why is it being recommended? And when I realized just how easy it was to use, I could see exactly why it was being recommended. You don't have to have a lot of editing knowledge for photo editing. You can just play about with it, and you can default it back.
So let me just give me a minute to put this picture up, and you can audio describe it.
Now this is the screen with a photograph on it. And the photograph is of Jazz, Ju's assistant's dog, who's a black dog. There's always difficulties photographing black cats and black dogs because you lose the definition. When you've got a fixed lens camera, as you do with the the camera phones and the the phone cameras and the tablet cameras, then you've got very little adjustment that can actually be made. The idea really is to try and minimize any zoom that you're using so that you can retain the integrity of the pixels which make up the picture. But when you've got a black dog, it's awfully difficult.
So I'll take that off and just pop the other one up.
Just before you do that, you can see down the right-hand side, there's all sorts of little tabs. And if you click onto one of them, they open up and it gives you a greater degree of
Yeah, so there's tabs for light, color, effects, detail, optics, and geometry. So let's just have a look at what you did.
and you can see his little face now.
Well, almost.
Really? And that was just using one of the filters. So I lightened it. And there's more definition of his coat, which is a curly poodly type coat. But you can also see there is sort of, it's possible to see where his face is and where his little eyes go.
And it hasn't whited anything out, which can happen if you're dealing with exposure. I'll just take that off. So finally, in this week's update, I've got a little video from our youth lead, the artist Hazel Brill. And Hazel's made a little video to show us how to use something called Stop Animator.
Welcome to the stop motion animation tutorial. Make a character using plasticine or blue tack. Add details with pens if you like. Using a smartphone or tablet, download the app called Stop Animator. Open Stop Animator, position your characters, press start and take your first picture. Move your character a tiny amount, then take another picture. And repeat, taking it on a journey. When you're done, press finish and the app will create a video from your photos. Enjoy animating.
I thought that was really useful because she showed how she was using her phone and the app on the phone as part of the creating the animation.
Yeah, so we've got a longer version, just about 8 minutes, which is going to go up on the website. I'm going to link through from the highlights and links page. Really, Hazel's making them first and foremost, I think, for her young people at the moment, but all of us can enjoy them. And in the 8-minute piece, you will also see the final video as the little mouse moves around and gets to know the other mouse. But that brings us on nicely to talking about filmmaking. But you wanted to talk about a film you saw at the weekend, Julie.
Yes, it was a standard film in many respects. It was made in 2014 with Helen Mirren and a whole host of other actors. It had a very big cast. It was called
100 Feet.
100-Foot Journey. Yeah, 100-Foot Journey. We found it on Netflix, didn't we? And I got completely engrossed in it, which surprised me because it was about an immigrant family from India who came to France after trying out living in Hounslow quite unsuccessfully. They didn't enjoy it. They were restaurateurs and were, sort of like their whole family was engaged in creating Indian dishes. And they ended up in France opposite Helen Mirren's wonderful French, lovely, Michelin-starred house, which was a restaurant. And it showed, I thought, the stages of becoming part of and included in a community, which was very different. And also how that community could welcome somebody who came from somewhere where people just didn't know their culture at all.
But the food was wonderful. And again, I think for everybody who's not been out for a meal for a year, those of you who didn't eat out to help out, there's something about watching food being prepared in a restaurant for a couple of hours really, really, really engrossing. I did have one problem with it, though. I just couldn't believe Helen Mirren was French because her hair was not immaculate. And I'm a little bit obsessed with hair at the moment. And indeed, most people who know me would say probably always am. But I spent 3 or 4 months in Paris. I was 18. I was just 18 and I'd finished A-levels and I'd got nothing else to do and nowhere to go. So I got myself a job in Paris as an au pair. And Yeah, the hair was not immaculate. The hair was not French. That's all I.
No, see, I would differ. I know a lot of French athletes, and their hair was usually very, very incomplete.
Yeah.
It's stunning, but I'm talking about people running restaurants,
Oh,
not
well, okay.
going to tracks. I bet by the time they'd got off the track and were visiting parents. But anyway, I digress. But in a way, I don't, because I think it's about physicality. And it was shot in France, but it was an American movie. And if you know French people, there's just certain things, aren't there? And that was one of the things that I wanted to come on to talk about, which was, of course, that usual topic of cripping up. When is it okay? Is it ever okay for a non-disabled actor to be playing a disabled person? And is one of those problems that absolute lack of credibility, because it's about inhabiting a body, isn't it? And I think with us just having finished celebrating LGBT plus History Month, there's finally beginning to be a debate about whether straight people should be playing LGBTQI plus characters. And Russell T Davies, who of course not only wrote Queer as Folk, but has now written It's a Sin, has come out by saying, no, actually, I now believe straight actors should not be playing those roles. One of the reasons I'm really pleased about that as a lesbian is because people always go, why can't you be like the lesbians on TV? Because they're straight. That's why they look like straight people, because they're straight. And that is a real issue. Why can't you behave like the ones on TV who just have, they look absolutely like everybody else? And you think, because they're just not real. And I do find that a credibility problem, full stop. But I was really glad that Russell T Davies was beginning to recognise that, because he's such an influential writer. And I mean, you can never make predictions about people's sexual orientation, even if they come out and say they're straight. But I find a lot of those films really, really unconvincing. But of course, last night was the Golden Globes, which is the first awards ceremony leading up, if you like, to the Oscars. And people often dismiss it because I think the group who nominate for the awards are even less representative than the Academy. And it includes TV, which always brings in a lot of snobbery. But nonetheless, Sia's film Music received 2 awards. I think one for Best Actor, and was it Best Cinematography? I can't remember.
I think it was Best Picture through music and comedy, and then Kate Hudson got a nomination for Best Actor.
Oh, thanks for that reminder, Josh. We had not been very happy about the fact that, because in this film, it's using Sia's music to tell a story. And it stars her collaborator, Maddie Ziegler, who I think is 17 now and was 15 at the time of the film. I've watched Dance Moms for many years and therefore have followed Maddie Ziegler's career since she was 7 or 8. And what happened when she was about 12 or 13 is the rock star Sia, who I think is Australian, approached her and started casting her in her dance videos. And Maddie left her dancing school and left the show Dance Moms and almost became a kind of mini Sia. She's done some things, but mostly what she's done is with Sia. So Sia was always going to cast Maddie in her film. I mean, there's just no two ways about that. But what Sia chose to do, and I think this is where the choice comes, is to make the story about autism. And it's caused so much offence. And I don't know, do you want to start, Julie? Because I think you were sort of raging from almost the moment we switched it on.
I was so offended. The first shot was Maddie in her underwear. And I thought, oh dear, this is not going to be good. Because to me, throughout, it felt like it was disability for porn. It felt pornographic. There was too much underwear. There was too much scenes of an intimate nature to make it okay. It just wasn't okay. And I just got angrier and angrier. I liked Maddie's dancing when she was a dancer before she got involved with Sia to this level. Her dancing was absolutely lovely. And I'm not somebody who likes dance. I really am not. You know, I sat through it with Ju, sort of under duress, but I used to get completely engrossed in Maddie's dances. She's such a good dancer.
Yes, I mean, and I think that's another issue because, I mean, I've been following the debate, I think, since the film was released, partly because I was asked to comment, because I run the Together Disability Film Festival every year. But I thought, no, I really have to see it. And one of the things that nobody had mentioned in the criticism was this kind of really pornographic element. I mean, we've talked quite a bit on this show about opening credits because it's something we've been talking about within our Photographers and Filmmakers Club since the director Raina Haig started working with us a couple of years ago. And she really explained to us, you know, the function of the opening sequence, the stories you can tell in the opening sequence. And yes, the first shot in this opening sequence was Maddie in her underwear without her face. So you do really wonder what that opening sequence is telling you. But of course, the main criticism has come from casting somebody who's non-disabled. And you weren't impressed with the performance, were you? As some, you know, because the character music is supposed to be neurodiverse and virtually non-verbal.
No, I mean, it was grotesque. I thought, Maddie's not an actress. And even if she was an actress, I think the sort of the facial contortions and the tics that she's supposed to have assumed were not authentic. They didn't feel right. They felt very insulting, you know, to sort of people who are on the autistic spectrum.
Yes, I mean, I know over 100,000 people have signed a petition, not asking for it to be banned, but for example, to have warnings on it. Because what they seem to have done in deciding that her songs are going to tell the story of somebody with autism, it's very much what I would call autism light. You know, it's like they've ticked the bits off of the research. And the most controversial one is very early on, the character music starts to have a meltdown. And this large neighbour comes in and sits on her and shows the sister, Kate Hudson, how to do crushing to make her feel safe. And of course, people have died using those techniques. So in theory, that restraint scene is being removed, but in fact, it hasn't been. But all of it was very much kind of, on the one hand, there was this wonderful, loving neighbourhood. Well, you know, we've had no voluntary help for 12 months. And this situation was far more demanding, but somehow we were expected to believe that all of the neighbours in the apartment block would come together to make sure that every single day music would go out for a walk on her own and the neighbourhood would all watch out for her and the neighbourhood would come round whenever they had problems. But everything was so easily solved. It was like, oh, sit on them, no more problems with meltdowns. And I think another scene that's been really heavily criticised is she gets given a communication device. But she only says things like, I am happy, I am sad. And yet there's young people who've written whole books using communication devices. It just sort of gets ticked off the list. And the happy ending is where she gets given a service dog, which just arrives at the door when the neighbours applied for it. You know, there's none of the assessments, there's none of the heartbreak, there's none of the 2-week handover period. Everything is so easy. And they say, oh, but it was made with so much love. And you think, yeah, very patronizing, offensive love that had no understanding. You know, I think having watched that documentary about Harvey Price, and you've got the holes in the kitchen wall from when he's had a meltdown. And it's like, oh, we've got a solution now, right? We've ticked this off. We've got the solution. We've got the communication device. We've got the dog. We can sit on her whenever she gets upset, and that's all the problem solved. And I hadn't even seen those, other than the crushing, as criticisms. I was glad I watched it, partly because, like I say, tomorrow at Glasgow Film Festival, I'm chairing a panel as part of the industry session where we're looking at, you know, post-COVID, what is the future for disabled filmmakers, but also representation. One of the filmmakers I'm talking to tomorrow was saying to me, if I produce a show starring non-disabled actors, I can get it made. And if I pitch the same show with disabled characters, I can't get it made. And he's also given me the example of a documentary he made for the BBC, which won awards, but they ended up not screening it. But it was about somebody, I think with cerebral palsy, but somebody with a non-standard voice. And somehow that non-standard voice even though that person was the subject of a documentary, and even though that documentary had been commissioned, they still weren't able to get it over. I was looking at the Glasgow Film Festival programme because it's got two parts to it. You know, Glasgow is one of the three major film festivals in the UK. The other one being other ones being London and Edinburgh. And they always offer lots of new films for people in that city to be able to see because they're premiering them. But they also have a programme right through the whole thing for the industry, which, like I say, is what I'm taking part in. But looking at the public programme, and with most of these films, they're up for 2 or 3 days. You know, they're all paid for, but you can download them and watch them at any point over those few days. The only obviously disabled one is a film called Handsome, which seems from the writing not necessarily fact to be more from the carer's perspective. Certainly the way it's pushed or where it's promoted is that an older brother who's 24 decides whether to become what they describe as the full-time carer for the sibling with Down syndrome, although I'm not sure they even mean that. And they go on a journey, I think, to the States and somewhere else, and they meet different people with Down syndrome living their lives. You know, great. But that's only one film. You know, where are the big feature films and so on? And of course, the answer is they're not being made. Instead, they're casting people like Maddie. But I've been talking for ages, and I know Julie will just want to talk about how much more offended she is. So what have you got to, what are your thoughts on the subject?
Oh, I mean, how long you got? I think it is such a difficult area to, because, bottom line, it would be ideal if, the roles of disabled people were played by disabled people, but then disability can be so nuanced that there might only be one person that can be that one person. Otherwise, you are still having to act to some degree, to crip up. I could play someone who's a para, but I can stand. So, there's kind of,
Yes,
but I
I think that's right. Everybody is unique. So whoever, I think to me, it is that actual authenticity where my brain simply can't get across.
I
that
think
there's-
that's oh, go on, Josh, and then I'll come back.
I was going to say, for me, it's the authenticity that's important. I think one of the big criticism, I mean, I haven't seen a film, and I don't really plan to, because apart from all the controversy around it, apparently it's just not very good. So I'm not going to waste my £7 on watching it. But there was no involvement from the autism community in making the film. And if there had been, they probably would have gone, or more than the one person that Sia asked who said it was good. They would have gone, well, actually, that's not right. That's not right. That's not realistic. This doesn't happen. We don't act like this. And it probably would have made it far better and would have avoided a lot of these problems.
Well, I wonder whether it would have just finished it off.
Well, yeah, all that.
Because, for example, our very own intern Eve Smith has previously acted on TV as Jodie Whittaker's daughter in The Smoke. So she was in 3 episodes of a very high-powered. She's got the set experience. She's the right age. That character did not have exactly the same impairments as Eve, but Eve was able to play it. I mean, watching music, Eve could have played that. What was interesting about the choreography, it wasn't inclusive choreography, but it was choreography that was way within Maddie's limits, because it was almost like it had been choreographed for somebody who couldn't dance, but not for a disabled dancer. Fortunately, Eve can dance, but obviously she's disabled. But I think as soon as you'd put a real disabled person in that context, the rest of the film would have collapsed, because, as Josh said, it's not a very good film. And it's not a convincing film for anybody who knows disabled people, because you just sit there going, well, they've just bought a communication device and everything's solved. They've just
I think
everything's solved. So I think in a way it would have made the whole film fail.
I think
that part instead of Maddie.
I think
it just shouldn't have been made, which is the answer.
Yeah, I think, and this is my own personal opinion, and But for me, it's the performance that's more important. So, and yes, absolutely, cast disabled people to play disabled people roles. What really annoys me is when it's a character that's then not a no-name actor. That sounds really rude, but it's not played by a big Hollywood star, and it's just some random person that they've put in a chair. That really annoys me, because it's like, well, you could have found somebody that uses a wheelchair to play that. I think, for example, the theme about the film with Stephen Hawking, for example. I haven't seen it. Are you joking?
Yeah, I wouldn't watch it for that reason.
Is cast with Eddie Redmayne. I know Mum's seen it and she really liked it. And I think, are you going to disagree that on the performance side of it?
No.
I think, if you end up getting too far, I mean, I know there was loads of stuff around. There's an actor called Matt Boomer, who's a openly gay actor who plays lots of straight characters. And then there was loads of things of, oh, well, why should he? And it's like, well, because he's a good actor. So I think it's really difficult to get that balance of appropriate representation, but not too far.
The difference is that as gay people, we know exactly how straight people behave.
Yeah, that's
disabled people, we know exactly how non-disabled people behave. But it's that chicken and egg, and I think this is what I really wanted to explore before tomorrow in terms of Glasgow. That whole issue around, well, when does it just become impossible to be it? But how much is it dependent on us being invisible? And I think that's the difficulty. I remember there was one festival where we had cripping up as the subject of our Saturday debate. And there were two films that were just very much showing the same thing, but it was so obvious as soon as you saw one that the other one failed. And one film was a guy who has was it muscular dystrophy? Anyway, he had a particular form of MD. He was traveling around to meet other guys who were all in their 30s and 40s and doing all these incredible things, because he'd gone through university and he'd done his degrees and he was back at home. But he was very, very open about the level of support he needed. So he had filmed his PA helping him up in the morning, and the sort of, the winch and the hoist and all of the different support that he needed. And then you had a student film where, in fact, she had tried but had failed to get an actor with a degenerative condition. And you looked at his body and you just thought, well, I know this is not a disabled person. And as soon as your disbelief is suspended, or your belief is, I'm never going to get this the right word.
Yeah, it's when people are paras, but they're like tapping their feet to the music, and it's like, well, really? Could you not have sat still?
For me, I think that one of the things that really makes the difference is the narrative.
Yeah.
Why the film exists in the first place, and the narrative that underpins it. Because if the narrative has that credibility, it goes a long way. I mean, I can, I would be running out of time, but a couple of films that I can think that have the complete opposite effect. I really, really like Tom Hanks, but the film when he's
Forrest Gump.
I hate Forrest Gump. I think it just lampoons disabled people the whole way through for me. And then, but then the other film is a James McAvoy film, and I think it's called Only When I Dance, when he plays someone in an electric chair with muscular dystrophy, and his best mate is a guy with cerebral palsy.
I'm Dancing on the Inside.
Or Dancing on the Inside. Yeah.
I was actually going to use James McAvoy as my example earlier.
One, that film, and bearing in mind our own family dynamic, holds so much truth. And it is 10 years since I've seen it, so maybe I would go back and have a different perspective, looking at it from a critical point rather than an enjoyment point.
I didn't think it was a bad film. However, we have run out of time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give Julie the final word. Don't worry, because you're the boss. So coming up after Julie's final word, we will have Relax with Awa. Please do join us on Wednesday when Josh will be talking more about sports and gaming. Julie will be presenting a report, and lots of poems from the Pop-Up Poetry Club. We'll be going on a virtual walk with Merlot and much, much more. Final word to Julie.
I think it has to be about authenticity, not the narrative. I'm sorry, I do disagree with you. There was a whole spate of them. Rain Man, actually Philadelphia. Tom Hanks in Philadelphia offended me deeply. And My Left Foot, 4th of July. There's a whole,
I agree, all of those.
and I think you could say they're well written, they're well produced, but they're not authentic.
Thank you, Julie. So I will take all of this and more to Glasgow Film Festival tomorrow. It's not open to the public, but if I get a chance, I'll do a very brief report back. And I'm going to put the Glasgow Film Festival programme into the highlights and links, along with everything else we've discussed, and particularly, of course, those apps. So this is Relaxed with Awa. Thank you all for joining us.
I want you to imagine that you are in your favorite place. It can be anywhere in the world. We're not in lockdown anymore, so you are doing in your favorite place. And you are by an ocean of happiness or happy thoughts. And all your worries are in one hand, and you are just throw them into the ocean. Now the ocean color is yellow, a happy color, and you are going to watch them go down into the sea of happiness. Now after you've done that, you are going to go to the other island. How you get that is totally up to you. You can fly, you can spin, you can make a boat. So you reach to the island of Tortin Flowers, and you see nobody there but you. And you're walking around, you're walking, and then you hit something that you don't know. So you pick it up. It's a bird. Now this bird is not like any other bird. It talks to you. It listens to you. It knows your name. So you had the bird in your hand. You put it on your shoulders. And it's a talking bird. Kind of like a parrot. But not a parrot. So when you're walking along on the sand, and you're leaving footsteps in the sun. I see that. you are feeling calm, you are feeling relaxed, and you hearing birds singing in the trees, and you seeing them, and it makes you smile. And the sun is shining. It's not too hot, not too cold, but just you are relaxed. You are not worried about nothing, just you. Just you. You are at peace. You're at one with nature. Now, the sun is coming down. So you sit on the beach in front of the water, and you are taking a picture of the sunset, and you are to take your final breath in and out. When you're ready, come back in the room.